The fascinating history of Japan's Sakoku, the closed country.
Imagine sailing across the vast Pacific Ocean in the year 1800. Your ship battered by storms, and your crew desperate for fresh water and supplies. In the distance, you spot the mountainous coastline of Japan, a land of legendary riches and mystery. But as your vessel approaches the shore, you're met with an unusual sight. A line of coastal warning beacons erupting in flame, one after another, sending signals inland. Within hours, armed samurai patrol boats surround your ship, their crews shouting in a language you don't understand. Their message clear: turn back or die. This wasn't just an isolated incident. For over 2 centuries, the Japanese government maintained one of the strictest isolation policies ever known in human history. Under penalty of death, no Japanese could leave the country, and nearly all foreigners were forbidden from entering. This was Sakoku, the closed country, a unique experiment in national isolation that would shape Japan's culture and destiny for generations to come. But what would drive an entire nation to cut itself off from the rest of the world? The answer lies in a perfect storm of religion, politics, and fear that began in the late 16th century. Picture yourself in 1549, when the first Portuguese missionaries arrived on Japanese shores. Led by the charismatic Francis Xavier, these Jesuit priests found Japan in the midst of a brutal civil war, with powerful warlords battling for control of the fractured nation. The missionaries brought with them not just Christianity, but European firearms, sophisticated trading networks, and new technologies. Many Japanese daimyo, feudal lords, saw an opportunity in this cultural exchange, converting to Christianity to gain preferential access to Portuguese trade goods, particularly the matchlock muskets that were revolutionizing warfare. Within decades, Christianity had gained a foothold in Japan, with an estimated 300,000 converts by 1600. The port city of Nagasaki became a thriving center of European trade and Christian influence. Japanese Christians, known as Kirishitan, built churches, established schools, and began transforming parts of Japanese society. Some daimyo even sent diplomatic missions to Europe, creating direct links between Japan and the Western world. But this period of openness would not last. The newly unified Japan under Tokugawa Ieyasu began to view the growing Christian population with increasing suspicion. Reports from Spanish colonies in the Philippines and European activities in other Asian nations painted a disturbing picture. Wherever Christian missionaries went, European colonial expansion often followed. The Tokugawa shogunate feared that Christianity could be used as a tool for foreign powers to influence and potentially conquer Japan. The breaking point came with the Shimabara Rebellion of 1637. Christian peasants, pushed to their limits by heavy taxation and religious persecution, rose up against their daimyo in spectacular fashion. The rebellion, though ultimately crushed, sent shockwaves through the Japanese political establishment. It confirmed their worst fears about Christianity's potential to inspire resistance against legitimate authority. In response, the Tokugawa shogunate implemented increasingly strict measures to control foreign influence. First came the expulsion of all missionaries and the execution of Japanese Christians who refused to renounce their faith. Then, in a series of edicts between 1633 and 1639, the government established the full Sakoku policy. Under these new laws, Japanese ships were forbidden from leaving Japanese waters. Building large ocean-going vessels was prohibited. Foreign books were banned. Japanese citizens caught trying to leave the country faced execution. The only Europeans allowed to remain were a small group of Dutch traders, confined to a tiny artificial island called Dejima in Nagasaki Harbor, a space barely larger than a football field that would become Japan's sole window to the Western world for the next 2 centuries. But Sakoku wasn't just about fear of Christianity and foreign influence. The Tokugawa shogunate had created something unprecedented: a highly organized, peaceful, and prosperous society after centuries of civil war. The isolation policy helped maintain this stability by controlling the flow of information, goods, and people. It allowed the shogunate to regulate foreign trade through a single port, ensuring that wealth and foreign influence could be carefully monitored and controlled. This brings us to a fascinating paradox. While Sakoku closed Japan to most foreign influence, it didn't completely seal the country off from the world. The Dutch trading post at Dejima became a crucial source of scientific and technological knowledge. Japanese scholars, known as rangakusha, or Dutch learning scholars, would travel to Nagasaki to meet with Dutch traders, learning about everything from astronomy and medicine to photography and steam engines. Inside the closed borders of Tokugawa Japan, something remarkable was happening. Cut off from most foreign influence, Japanese culture began to evolve in extraordinary and unexpected ways. Think of it as a cultural pressure cooker, where traditional Japanese arts and customs merged with the few foreign elements already present, creating entirely new forms of expression. Take, for example, the story of Hiraga Gini, an 18th century Japanese inventor who never left his homeland but managed to recreate complex Dutch technological innovations using only books and diagrams smuggled through Dejima. Without access to European materials or tools, he improvised with local resources, eventually producing Japan's first electricity generator using native materials. This spirit of adaptation and innovation became a hallmark of Sakoku-era Japan. The isolation policy also gave birth to one of Japan's most vibrant cultural periods. Edo, modern-day Tokyo, grew into the world's largest city, with over 1 million inhabitants by 1721. Without the distractions of foreign trade or international conflicts, urban Japanese society developed sophisticated new forms of entertainment and art. The famous ukiyo-e woodblock prints, which would later inspire European Impressionist painters, flourished during this period. These prints captured everything from kabuki actors and beautiful courtesans to landscapes and daily life scenes, providing us with a vibrant window into Sakoku-era Japan. But perhaps the most fascinating aspect of Sakoku was its impact on Japanese food culture. When the Portuguese were expelled, they left behind a recipe for tempura, battered and fried seafood or vegetables. In isolation, the Japanese transformed this cooking technique into an art form, creating the delicate and refined tempura we know today. Similarly, Japanese curry, now considered a national dish, evolved from recipes brought by the Dutch, modified over generations using local ingredients and tastes. The policy of isolation also created an unusual information economy. The Dutch trading post at Dejima became the source of what was called Dutch learning, or rangaku. Picture this. Once a year, the Dutch trading chief would make a long journey to Edo to meet with the shogun. This event, known as the Dutch Embassy to Edo, became a crucial channel for information about the outside world. Japanese scholars would gather along the route, hoping to catch glimpses of the Dutch procession and perhaps gain new knowledge about Western science and technology. These scholars often went to extraordinary lengths to acquire foreign knowledge. Consider the story of Sugita Genpaku, a Japanese physician who, in 1771, obtained a Dutch medical text showing human anatomical drawings. Having never seen accurate anatomical illustrations before, he and his colleagues were stunned by their precision. They spent months secretly translating the book, creating new Japanese medical terminology in the process. This work, later published as New Book of Anatomy, revolutionized Japanese medicine. But life during Sakoku wasn't just about cultural and intellectual developments. The Tokugawa shogunate created an elaborate system of social control that would have been impossible in a more open society. They established 4 rigid social classes: samurai at the top, followed by farmers, artisans, and merchants at the bottom. Movement between classes was nearly impossible, and everyone's role in society was strictly defined. To maintain this system, the government implemented a network of checkpoints called sekisho along major roads. Travelers needed official permission to pass through these checkpoints, and women faced particularly strict scrutiny. a measure designed to prevent daimyo from secretly moving their wives and children as political hostages. The Sakoku system was so effective that it became a model for modern border control practices. The isolation policy also had unexpected environmental effects. With limited foreign trade, Japan had to become self-sufficient in nearly everything. This led to sophisticated recycling systems and sustainable forestry practices that were centuries ahead of their time. By the 18th century, the Japanese had developed detailed scientific knowledge about crop rotation, fertilization, and water management. They turned what was initially a limitation into an advantage, creating one of the world's most efficient pre-industrial agricultural systems. Yet despite these achievements, cracks began to appear in Japan's self-imposed isolation. As Western nations industrialized and expanded their influence across Asia, pressure mounted on Japan to open its doors. Strange ships began appearing more frequently off Japanese coasts. Russian, British, and American vessels seeking trade relations or simply needing supplies. The Japanese called these kurofune, or black ships, and their increasing presence caused growing anxiety among Japanese leaders. The beginning of the end for Sakoku came on a quiet summer morning in 1853, when 4 ominous black ships appeared in Edo Bay. These were Commodore Matthew Perry's American warships, armed with the latest naval technology that Japan had never seen before: steam engines and powerful cannons. The sight of these vessels sent shockwaves through Japanese society. For the first time in 2 centuries, Japan faced an undeniable truth. The world had changed dramatically during their isolation, and they were now dangerously behind. Perry's arrival marked a crucial moment in Japanese history, but it's often misunderstood. The truth is, Japan's leadership had already been secretly preparing for this moment. For decades, a growing number of Japanese scholars and officials had been studying Western technology and military tactics through Dutch trading contacts. They knew change was coming, they just didn't know exactly when or how. The shogunate's response to Perry's demands for open trade relations revealed the deep divisions that Sakoku had created in Japanese society. Some officials argued for maintaining isolation at all costs, even suggesting using suicide boats packed with explosives to attack foreign vessels. Others recognized that Japan needed to change to survive. This internal conflict would eventually lead to the collapse of the Tokugawa shogunate and the birth of modern Japan. But here's what makes this story truly fascinating. When Japan finally decided to end its isolation, it did so with the same thoroughness and attention to detail that had characterized the Sakoku policy itself. Rather than gradually opening up, Japan launched into one of the most ambitious modernization programs in human history. Within a single generation, the country transformed from a feudal society into an industrial power. This rapid transformation was possible precisely because of certain aspects of Sakoku. During isolation, Japan had maintained high literacy rates, developed sophisticated urban planning, and created efficient administrative systems. The rigid social structure of the Tokugawa period had produced a population accustomed to discipline and organized effort. Even the practice of sending scholars to study Dutch learning had created a template for how to adapt foreign knowledge to Japanese needs. The legacy of Sakoku continues to influence Japan today in subtle but significant ways. Japanese business practices often emphasize self-reliance and the importance of maintaining stable internal markets. The country's approach to foreign cultural influences, selective adoption, and adaptation can be traced back to the Sakoku period. Even Japan's famous attention to quality and detail in manufacturing has roots in the self-sufficient economy of the isolation era. As we look at Japan today, a global leader in technology, popular culture, and economic power, it's remarkable to think that just over 150 years ago, it was a closed society that deliberately chose isolation. The end of Sakoku didn't just open Japan to the world. It revealed the extraordinary adaptability and resilience of Japanese culture. It showed that sometimes what appears to be a weakness, in this case, isolation, can become a source of strength, fostering unique developments that might not have been possible in a more open environment. Thank you for watching this exploration of one of history's most fascinating experiments in national isolation. If you enjoyed learning about Japan's Sakoku period, please subscribe to our channel and hit the like button. We have many more fascinating stories about Japanese history and culture coming your way. Also, let us know in the comments what aspects of Japanese history you'd like to learn more about in future videos.